A Navy SEAL ship went down in the middle of a raging Arctic storm. When the waves finally released him, he washed ashore on an island no map dared to mark. The beach carried a single word written in the sand, SOS, and the snow around it was stained with blood. What he found beyond that trail wasn't a survivor, but a secret mankind was never meant to uncover. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the miracles God hides in the darkest places. The wind screamed across Lake Superior like an unbroken animal, dragging veils of snow through a sky that looked carved from iron. The waves rose like dark mountains, slamming into the bow of the Navy transport vessel Mariner's Oath. Inside that storm stood Ethan Cole, a 35-year-old Navy SEAL whose soul carried more scars than his body ever showed. He wore the official winter tactical gear of the U.S. Navy SEALs, a digital camouflage uniform of muted gray and forest green tones, a tan tactical vest filled with ammunition pockets, black combat gloves gripping the rail, and heavy-duty boots slick with sea spray. His square jaw was rough with 3 days' beard, his dark brown hair cropped close to his scalp, and his eyes, the color of storm clouds, carried the kind of silence found only in men who had seen too much. He was a man of discipline, not by nature, but by necessity. Years of covert operations, loss, and betrayal had carved him into something both sharp and hollow. The mission he'd just completed had been bloody but successful. A hostage rescue in Alaska that left 3 comrades in the snow and his conscience somewhere behind them. Now, returning to base aboard this supply ship, Ethan hoped for rest, though a quiet voice inside him whispered that men like him never truly went home. Beside him, pressed against the steel wall of the deck, lay Ranger, his German Shepherd partner. The dog was 6 years old, in his prime, a creature of lean muscle and unwavering loyalty, with a thick coat of black and tan fur and intelligent amber eyes that reflected both caution and calm. Ranger had been trained since puppyhood in explosive detection and tactical rescue. He was the last connection Ethan had to his fallen team. He had served with Ethan's best friend, Lieutenant Mark Harlan, who didn't survive their last deployment. Ranger had been there when the mountain collapsed in Afghanistan. Ethan had pulled the dog from the rubble, both of them bleeding, both refusing to die. Since then, the two were inseparable, a soldier and his living conscience. The Mariner's Oath groaned as thunder rolled over the endless gray horizon. The captain, a grizzled old merchant sailor named Harvey Briggs, barked orders through the storm. Harvey was built like a tree stump, wide-shouldered with weather-beaten skin and a tobacco-stained beard, his voice hoarse from a lifetime of shouting against the wind. "She's turning south, Cole," he yelled, gripping the wheel with both hands. "If we can't outlast this front, we'll be driftwood by dawn." Ethan didn't answer. He simply steadied his stance, scanning the shifting horizon through the whiteout. The world was dissolving into snow and salt. Ranger whined, low and uneasy, his ears pinned back. A warning. Then came the sound, a hollow metallic crack that split the storm's roar. The port side hull shuddered violently. A rogue wave, higher than the mast, crashed down like a hammer of God. The ship lurched. Ethan barely had time to grab the rail before the deck tilted sharply. Men screamed. Crates slid. A lifeboat tore free of its mooring. "Brace!" Harvey shouted, and then the lights went out. The world became motion, tumbling, smashing, freezing. The sea swallowed the ship whole. Ethan's body slammed into the icy blackness, armor dragging him under. He kicked hard, muscles burning, eyes stinging with salt. Ranger's faint silhouette thrashed beside him, then disappeared beneath a curtain of foam. Ethan's mind fractured between training and terror. Find air, find him. He tore off his tactical vest, lungs screaming, and clawed upward. The surface exploded around him, the storm now a wall of white chaos. "Ranger!" he roared into the wind, and then something hard struck his head. Darkness. When consciousness returned, it was to silence, a deep, almost holy quiet. The sea had receded, leaving him sprawled on a frozen shore. The air was bitter and clean. His body ached in ways that told him he was alive, but shouldn't be. Snow fell in soft, whispering flakes, covering the remnants of the wreckage scattered across the sand. Beside him, Ranger lay motionless. Ethan's breath hitched until the dog stirred, coughed up seawater, and looked at him. Relief hit Ethan harder than any bullet. "Good boy," he murmured hoarsely, crawling closer. They had drifted ashore on what appeared to be an island, small, rugged, surrounded by cliffs glazed with ice. No lights, no movement, no sound, but the sea. He stripped off his soaked gloves, felt the frostbite creeping into his fingers, and forced himself upright. His military instincts kicked in. Assess, shelter, fire, water. But as he scanned the beach, something strange broke the monotony of white. A dark shape carved into the snow-dusted sand. 3 enormous letters. SOS. Ethan's pulse spiked. Someone else had been here, or still was. He crouched, tracing the edges of the letters. The snow around them was fresh, maybe a day old. Ranger sniffed the air, tail stiff, then trotted inland toward a line of pine trees bent under the weight of ice. "Easy," Ethan said, following close. The forest loomed like a cathedral of silence. Branches creaked, snow cracked underfoot, and every breath came out like smoke. Then Ranger stopped, a low growl vibrating in his chest. Ethan saw it, a thin trail of crimson across the white ground, barely visible under the fresh snow. Blood. Human. He followed it uphill, the prints uneven and dragging. They led him through the trees, past broken branches, to a small clearing where a wooden cabin leaned half-collapsed against a stone ridge. Smoke, faint but steady, drifted from a crooked chimney. The front door hung ajar, one hinge broken. Ethan approached carefully, hand on the sheath knife at his belt. Ranger crept beside him, silent and alert. The smell of smoke mixed with something metallic. Blood! Inside, dim firelight flickered across rough log walls. On the floor lay a woman, half buried beneath a fallen beam. She was maybe 30, with pale skin streaked with mud and blood, auburn hair tangled across her face, and eyes half open but unfocused. She wore a torn expedition jacket, the kind issued to scientific teams, and her breath came shallow and fast. Ethan knelt beside her, checking her pulse, weak but steady. "Hey, stay with me." Her lips moved, no sound coming. He braced himself, lifted the beam just enough to drag her free. Her left leg was crushed, twisted wrong, soaked in dark red. As he tore open his medical pouch and worked to stop the bleeding, the woman's eyes fluttered open. Who are you?" she whispered, voice rasping. "Ethan Cole," he said simply. "U.S. Navy. You're safe now." She gave a weak laugh that turned into a cough. "Safe? On this island?" Her accent was Midwest American, soft but worn, like someone used to talking over long nights of lab work. "What's your name?" Ethan asked while tightening the tourniquet. "Emily," she breathed. "Dr. Emily Grant." She passed out before he could ask more. Ethan checked the wound again. Bad, but survivable if infection didn't set in. He lifted her onto the cot near the hearth, threw more wood onto the fire, and turned to Ranger. "We're not alone, buddy." The dog tilted his head, ears twitching at distant thunder. Outside, the storm's echo still murmured across the sea, a reminder that they hadn't escaped the world, only stumbled into another kind of war. And somewhere beyond the waves, something or someone was still waiting. The storm had retreated to a distant murmur beyond the cliffs, leaving the island drowned in pale light and silence. Inside the collapsed cabin, the fire crackled faintly, casting amber shadows across rough wooden walls still dripping with melted snow. Ethan Cole, his body stiff from exhaustion, crouched near the hearth, feeding dry twigs into the flame. He was still dressed in his battle-worn Navy SEAL winter gear, the digital gray-green camouflage now darkened by seawater, his tan tactical vest torn at one strap, and his black gloves lying nearby, drying by the heat. His movements were mechanical, efficient, the routine of a man whose training had long replaced panic with motion. Yet behind those precise gestures lived the mind of someone fighting ghosts. He kept seeing flashes, the ship splitting apart, the screams swallowed by waves, and his fallen brothers, the men he could not save. But he pushed the memories down, for now survival came first. On the cot lay Dr. Emily Grant, unconscious, but breathing. Her pale face glowed faintly in the firelight, framed by hair the color of autumn leaves. Ethan had cleaned the wound on her leg, packed it with bandages torn from his undershirt, and improvised a splint from a broken chair leg and leather straps. Her pulse was weak but steady. She was the kind of person whose features carried an odd nobility even in distress. Sharp cheekbones, a determined jaw softened by kindness. Her hands, when he had lifted her, were calloused, the hands of someone used to work, not luxury. Ranger lay near the door, his black and tan coat glistening in the dim light, eyes half closed but alert. Every now and then his ears twitched toward the sound of branches cracking outside. The dog's chest rose in steady rhythm, calm but ready. Ethan envied him. Ranger never doubted, never questioned. He simply existed with purpose. After hours of silence, Emily stirred. A faint moan escaped her lips, her brows tightening as pain clawed its way back into her consciousness. Ethan leaned over. "Easy," he said softly, voice rough but measured. "You're safe. You're going to be fine." Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes of hazel green, tired, clouded by fever, but intelligent. She looked around, confusion giving way to dawning memory. "The storm," she whispered. "It took everything?" Her voice cracked, part grief, part disbelief. Ethan poured water from his canteen into a tin cup and lifted it to her lips. "Drink slow." As she drank, she studied him. "You're military," she rasped. Ethan nodded. "SEALs. Out of Great Lakes. My ship went down. You?" Her gaze drifted toward the broken door where the snow had piled high. "Research team. We were stationed here for ecological survey work." The words hung in the air, too polished, too rehearsed, and Ethan caught it. His instincts prickled. "Survey work?" he repeated, one brow lifting. "On a classified island in the middle of Lake Superior?" She looked away, avoiding the question. "You wouldn't believe me." "Try me," he said. But before she could answer, a sound outside cut through the fragile calm. A single, short bark from Ranger. Ethan rose instantly, hand on his knife. The dog stood by the door, nose twitching, tail stiff. Ethan stepped outside, scanning the tree line. The forest was dim and eerily still. The snow muffled all sound, but somewhere deep within it came a rhythmic crunch. Not wind, not branches. Footsteps, human or animal, he couldn't yet tell. He crouched low, his body a machine of silence. "Stay," he whispered to Ranger. The dog obeyed, but kept his head turned toward the sound. After a tense minute, the noise faded into the wind. Back inside, Emily's voice trembled. "You shouldn't go far. The island. It's not safe." Ethan gave her a look that was part curiosity, part challenge. "Because of the storm?" "No," she murmured, staring into the fire. "Because of what was here before it." Her tone was distant, haunted. Ethan waited, but she said no more. Night descended again, bringing with it a creeping cold that seeped through every crack in the walls. Ethan and Ranger took turns gathering wood from the tree line, careful not to wander too deep. When he returned, Emily was awake and trying to sit up. He frowned. "You move that leg, you undo all the work I just did." She gave a faint smile, stubborn, even in pain. "I don't like lying still." Ethan sighed and handed her a bowl of hot water he'd boiled with strips of bark. "Willow," he said. "Natural painkiller. Chew it if you can stand the taste." She nodded, her lips quirking with a trace of humor. "Do all seals carry a wilderness pharmacy?" "Only the paranoid ones," he replied. They shared a quiet moment, the fire snapping between them. Outside, the world was white and merciless, but inside there was the smallest ember of human warmth. Ethan could feel the tension easing until he noticed something odd. Near Emily's pack, half buried under the torn jacket, a metallic object caught the firelight. He reached for it. It was a signal beacon, military grade, the kind used for satellite communication, far too advanced for any ecological survey team. He turned it over in his hands, the markings half scratched off but still legible. Property of Northbridge Defense Technologies. "Want to explain why our research teams carry military hardware?" he asked, his tone careful but sharp. Emily froze, eyes flicking to the beacon. "That's not ours," she said too quickly. Ethan's stare hardened. "You expect me to believe that?" She opened her mouth, then stopped. Her shoulders slumped, and the exhaustion in her face deepened into something heavier, guilt. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered. "We thought it was environmental work. That's what they told us. But it wasn't." The wind howled outside, shaking the door. Ranger growled low, as if sensing the shift in the air. Ethan leaned closer. "Start from the beginning," he said quietly. Emily's voice trembled. "You think this island's uninhabited? It's not. The organization that brought us here, they used us as cover, scientists for hire, studying ecosystems, but we were just camouflage. The truth is, they were breeding animals here, not ordinary ones." Ethan felt a chill unrelated to the cold. "What kind of animals?" Emily hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the window as if afraid something might be listening. "Genetically engineered, designed for resilience, adaptability. Some with traits that shouldn't exist outside myth, the kind of research that gets you buried if you talk." Her voice broke slightly. "I escaped when they moved the others off island. The storm hit before I could signal for help." Ethan stared at her, disbelief warring with instinct. It sounded insane, but the beacon, the secrecy, the fear in her eyes, they didn't lie. He stood and paced, jaw tightening. "And now?" he asked. Emily looked at him with an expression that cut straight through him, a mix of fear and resolve. "Now they'll come back. They always do." A branch cracked outside, sharp, deliberate. Ranger's head shot up, a growl rumbling from deep within his chest. Ethan grabbed his pistol, stepping toward the door. Emily's whisper barely rose above the fire. "It's starting again, isn't it?" Ethan didn't answer. The wind died suddenly, and in that awful silence came a sound that didn't belong, the slow, heavy crunch of boots on snow. Human, close. He gave Ranger a hand signal, silent readiness. The dog moved to his side. Emily clutched the blanket tighter, her breathing shallow. The fire flickered once, shadows stretching across the cabin like dark fingers. Then came a voice from the forest. Calm, male, too controlled to be lost. "Dr. Grant, we know you're alive." Ethan's blood ran cold. The voice from the forest froze the air itself. "Dr. Grant, we know you're alive." The words drifted through the snow like smoke, deliberate and unnervingly calm. Ethan Cole didn't move. Years of combat had trained him to recognize control. This was not a lost wanderer calling into the dark. This was a hunter announcing presence, confident in his target. He motioned silently to Ranger, who sank low near the door, muscles coiled, teeth bared in a soundless growl. Inside the cabin, Dr. Emily Grant gripped the edge of her blanket, her pale knuckles betraying fear she tried to hide. The light from the fire flickered across her face, highlighting the hollows under her eyes. The exhaustion, the guilt, and now the terror of being found. Ethan eased toward the door, pressing his back to the wooden frame. "How many?" he whispered to Ranger, though he already knew the dog's instincts were sharper than radar. Ranger's ears pivoted twice, left, then forward, before he let out a single huff. 2, maybe 3. Professionals. The snow had muffled their steps, but their spacing was precise. No panic, no chatter. They weren't here to search. They were here to retrieve or eliminate. Ethan peered through a gap in the wood. Through the drifting snow, he caught glimpses of movement, dark shapes blending with the trees. One of them stepped forward into the faint moonlight. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in matte black tactical gear designed to absorb light. His face was clean-shaven but hard, angular, with a nose that had been broken more than once and healed without care. The man's eyes, pale gray, reflected neither cruelty nor mercy, only calculation. He held his rifle with the casual ease of long familiarity. Ethan recognized that stance. It was military, maybe ex-special forces, the kind of man who'd traded allegiance for a paycheck. "Dr. Grant," the stranger called again, voice steady, "we don't want to hurt you. We're here to bring you home. You know you can't survive out here forever." His tone was almost paternal, the kind used by interrogators who preferred words before bullets. Ethan noted that. The man wanted compliance, not chaos, at least for now. Emily's whisper was thin but sharp. "That's Marcus Voss. He used to be our security chief." Ethan turned to her. "Yours?" She nodded, tears threatening to surface. "He worked for Northbridge. When the project went bad, he stayed behind with them. He's the one who led the lockdown when I escaped." Her voice cracked. "He doesn't fail missions." Ethan's mind clicked through probabilities. 3 hostiles, unknown backup, injured civilian, 1 K9, no comms, no advantage but terrain. He'd fought in worse, but never this exposed. "Can he track us?" "He trained the ones who did," she said bitterly. A sudden thud hit the door. Deliberate, controlled. A warning. You have 5 minutes to come out, Marcus said. After that, I can't promise what happens next. Ethan scanned the room quickly. There was one exit, the back window, half frozen shut. He moved fast, shoving the wooden shutters open just enough to create an escape path. We move now, he told Emily. You can't fight on that leg, but you can move if I carry you. She shook her head weakly. They'll see us. Ethan's tone hardened, quiet but absolute. They'll see me. You stay behind, Ranger. He tore a wool blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders. The firelight caught in her eyes, and for a second she looked less like a survivor and more like a lost ghost. Why are you helping me? She asked, her voice trembling. Ethan paused, jaw tight. Because somebody should have. They slipped out the back. The wind cut like a blade, and the snow bit at exposed skin. Ethan carried Emily across the clearing, Ranger leading ahead, his paws silent on the crusted ice. Behind them, the cabin door burst open. Marcus's men stormed in. Empty, one shouted. Marcus didn't curse or shout. He simply adjusted his headset. They're heading north. Thermal shows 3 signatures. In the forest, Ethan pressed forward, lungs burning. He could hear them moving behind, efficient, closing in. He ducked behind a fallen pine, setting Emily down gently. Stay low, he ordered. Ranger's ears twitched. Danger from the left. Ethan raised his pistol, waiting. A shadow moved between the trees. 2 figures, one with a suppressed rifle, the other scanning with night vision goggles. Ethan exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger once. The shot echoed like thunder in the quiet. The man with the rifle dropped silently into the snow. The second one spun, firing wildly. Bullets tore through branches, splinters slicing across Ethan's cheek. Ranger lunged, his body a blur of muscle and instinct, slamming the shooter into the tree line. A scream cut short, then silence. Ethan crawled to the downed man, retrieved a radio, and crushed it under his boot. He looked back at Emily. She was shaking, but alive, eyes wide. You killed them, she whispered. They'd have done worse, Ethan replied flatly. The woods fell silent again, except for the low moan of the wind. He won't stop, Emily said quietly. Marcus, he'll keep coming until I'm dead or captured. Ethan nodded. Then we stay ahead. He scanned the horizon. Through the skeletal trees, he spotted a faint orange glow, the reflection of distant lights, artificial and steady. There's something up there, he murmured. A base? Emily's face drained of color. No, that's the old research compound. They moved toward it through the storm. The journey brutal. Emily's breath came in ragged bursts, her leg throbbing despite the splint. Ethan supported her weight, each step a grind of ice and pain. Ranger led the way, pausing every few yards to test the air. As they neared the ridge, the structure emerged. Steel buildings half buried in snow, fences twisted by the wind. The remnants of Northbridge's operation loomed like bones of some dead animal. Ethan forced open a side door, ushering them inside. The air was still, colder than outside, and smelled faintly of oil and decay. Emergency lights flickered weakly, powered by an old generator somewhere in the depths. The corridor stretched ahead, lined with glass observation rooms. Most were empty, except one. Inside, beneath a shattered fluorescent lamp, stood a row of cages. They were large, reinforced, built for something more powerful than any wolf. The metal bars were bent outward, the locks broken. On the floor were scratches, deep, clawed gouges. Ethan felt his stomach twist. What the hell did they keep here? He muttered. Emily's voice was hollow. They called them Phase 4 subjects, creatures designed to survive anything. I think they survived this place too. A sound echoed through the corridor, low, heavy, almost like breathing. Ranger's hackles rose, a deep growl rumbling in his chest. Emily's eyes widened. Ethan, that sound isn't human. He raised his weapon, scanning the shadows beyond the cages. The air grew warmer, heavy with a faint metallic tang. Somewhere in the dark, something shifted, a slow, deliberate movement scraping against concrete. Ranger barked once, sharp and warning. Then came the scream, not of a human, not of any animal Ethan had ever known. A guttural, unnatural roar that shook dust from the ceiling. Ethan turned to Emily, his voice low and hard. Run. The scream still echoed through the steel corridor long after its source fell silent. Ethan Cole held his weapon high, the muzzle cutting through beams of flickering light as dust swirled in the stale air. The sound hadn't been human. Too guttural, too deep, resonating in his chest like thunder trapped inside metal walls. Dr. Emily Grant clung to the wall beside him, her face ghostly pale, lips trembling as if her body hadn't yet caught up with the terror in her mind. That thing, she whispered, it was supposed to be contained. Ethan glanced back at her, jaw tight, eyes hard beneath his short, dark hair. Supposed to be doesn't mean it is. Ranger, the 6-year-old German shepherd, stood rigid, hackles raised, his amber eyes locked on the dark hall ahead. His low growl vibrated through the silence, the primal warning of an animal that understood danger long before words could define it. Ethan trusted that sound more than any alarm. "Stay behind me," he said quietly, and they began to move. The hallway stretched like a frozen artery, lined with cracked windows that revealed abandoned laboratories. Inside one room, Ethan saw overturned tables, shattered computers, and blood dried black against tile. Faded on a wall, a slogan still read, "North Bridge, shaping tomorrow's life." The irony was unbearable. They reached a junction where the corridor split, one path descending into darkness, the other leading toward faint red light pulsing through the frost. Ethan crouched, touching a patch of snow tracked across the floor. Fresh. Someone else had passed through recently. "They're not far," he muttered. Emily's breath quickened. "Marcus?" Ethan nodded grimly. "Or whatever they left behind." From the far side of the hall came movement. Fast, scraping, irregular, a metallic clang, then silence. Ranger growled again, pressing closer to Ethan's leg. The light above them flickered and died, plunging the hall into shadow. "Generators dying," Ethan whispered. He turned to Emily. "We find power, or we freeze in the dark." They moved toward the red glow. It led them into what had once been a control room. The large glass panels overlooked a subterranean chamber below, a place that looked half lab, half cage. Banks of servers hummed weakly, lights blinking like the eyes of tired machines. A man was slumped over one of the consoles, his lab coat stiff with frost. Ethan checked the pulse, nothing but ice. The ID badge read, "Dr. Alan Becker." Emily gasped softly. "Alan, he was one of ours." Geneticist mid-40s used to joke that science was safer than politics. She reached out, touching the badge with trembling fingers. "He must have stayed behind when they evacuated." Ethan studied the man's face. Hollow cheeks, graying beard, eyes frozen open in horror. "Whatever he saw," Ethan murmured, "he didn't die easy." On the console, a small monitor still flickered. The feed showed a live camera view, a tunnel below lined with reinforced glass. Inside one of the cells, a shape moved. It was hunched, massive, its skin gray-white and glistening like wet stone. The creature's arms were too long, ending in clawed hands, and its breath steamed in the cold air. When it turned, Ethan caught a glimpse of its face. Part human, part wolf, the eyes an unnatural amber that glowed in the dimness. Emily covered her mouth to stifle a cry. "They called it Specimen 9, she whispered. "It wasn't just an animal, it had human DNA. They wanted to create endurance in extreme cold." Ethan's voice was steady, but edged with disgust. "They made monsters." The monitor flickered again. Another camera showing a group of men moving cautiously through the lower level. Marcus Voss was among them, rifle raised, scanning the shadows. His cold, gray eyes flicked toward the cages, unaware he was being watched. Ethan smirked grimly. "Guess he found what he came for." Suddenly, one of the men on screen screamed. The creature lunged from the dark, its claws slicing through flesh. Blood splattered against the glass as the feed cut to static. Emily stumbled back, choking down a sob. "Oh, God!" Ethan's hand shot out, steadying her. "Quiet!" The sound of boots echoed again. Closer now from the corridor they'd come through. Marcus's voice carried through the metal. "Cole, I know you're in here. You can't outrun this place." Ethan motioned for silence and crouched near the side console. He found a control panel half buried in frost, still functional. "If the generators are tied to this grid, I can reroute power to the upper lift." Emily frowned. "You're going down there?" "Not yet," he said, eyes locked on the map. "But if we want out, we'll need to reactivate the external relay." His finger hovered over a button marked Sub-Level Power Core Access. Before he could press it, Ranger barked once, short and sharp. Movement at the far door. The handle twisted slowly. Ethan aimed, finger tense. The door creaked open, revealing a woman, tall, mid-30s, wearing a ragged thermal suit stained with oil and dirt. Her blonde hair was matted under a torn beanie, and her face was gaunt but alive, eyes fever bright. She raised her hands quickly. "Don't shoot, please." Ethan hesitated. "Who are you?" "Dr. Leah Monroe," she gasped. "I was part of the medical division. You have to shut it down, the whole facility. If the backup cores reach temperature, the containment seals will fail. Those things, they'll all get out." Emily stepped forward. "Leah, you survived?" Leah's lips quivered. "Barely. I hid in the maintenance tunnels. Marcus and his men, they're not here to rescue anyone. They're here to extract data, not people." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Data?" Leah nodded frantically. "The main server vault. It holds the genetic blueprints. They'll burn this place after retrieving them." Emily turned pale. "That means they'll destroy everything, including us." A low, distant rumble shook the floor beneath their feet. Somewhere deep below, metal screamed against stone. Ranger whined, tail low, body tense. Leah looked at the ceiling in panic. "It's the Phase 9 cell. The backup generator's overheating." Ethan grabbed his rifle. "We move. Now." They sprinted down the corridor, following the tremors. Alarms blared weakly, red lights pulsing like a heartbeat. The sound grew louder, crashing metal, breaking glass, and then a roar that tore through the facility. The creature had escaped. They reached a service stairwell leading upward. Leah stumbled, nearly falling, but Ethan caught her arm and pulled her along. Emily followed close behind, limping on her injured leg, determination outshining fear. From below came the rapid stutter of gunfire, Marcus's men screaming, then silence. A body slammed into the stairwell door. one of the mercenaries, face torn beyond recognition. The smell of blood hit like a slap. Ethan forced the group upward, breath ragged. "Keep moving!" Behind them, metal screeched again, the sound of something large crawling through the ducts. When they burst into the next corridor, they found the main hangar, wide open, with the remains of research vehicles frozen under frost. A single heavy snowcat sat near the exit bay, its engine intact, but cold. Leah pointed. "That's our only way out." Ethan nodded. "Then we make it run." He turned to Emily. "Help her prep the generator. Ranger and I will cover you." The dog barked once, understanding the order. As Leah and Emily worked, Ethan positioned himself at the entrance, rifle steady. He could feel the vibration of something massive approaching. The temperature dropped sharply, the air frosting with each breath. From the far end of the corridor, two glowing eyes emerged through the dark. The creature stepped into the light, blood steaming against its skin. Ethan muttered to himself, "Round two." He raised his weapon, and behind him the snowcat engine roared to life. The air inside the hangar turned to ice as Specimen 9 stepped fully into the light. The thing's breath came out in plumes of steam, and its amber eyes fixed on Ethan Cole with a calculating hunger that was almost human. The creature's frame was monstrous, nearly 9 feet tall, its shoulders as broad as a door, the gray flesh stretched tight over muscle that looked carved from stone. Frost clung to its claws, and when it exhaled, a low growl vibrated through the metal walls like distant thunder. Ethan tightened his grip on his rifle, his pulse slow and deliberate. "Emily, Leah, get that engine running now," he barked, voice like gravel over steel. Ranger, fur bristled and teeth bared, crouched low beside him, a perfect mirror of his master's readiness. Dr. Emily Grant was kneeling near the snowcat's ignition panel, hands trembling as she tried to connect frayed power cables. Her face was slick with sweat despite the cold, her red-brown hair sticking to her cheek, her breathing short and ragged. She had the air of someone who had seen the cost of science too closely and would do anything to make amends. Beside her, Dr. Leah Monroe, pale and feverish, rummaged through a box of tools. Her blonde hair was tied back in a messy braid, her hands raw and shaking. "The fuel lines are frozen solid," she gasped. "We need heat, anything to melt them." Ethan fired a controlled burst toward the ceiling lights. Glass exploded, sparks rained down, and for a fleeting second, the creature paused, snarling at the light. "There's your fire," Ethan muttered. The monster lunged. Its speed defied its size, claws gouging the floor as it crossed 20 feet in a heartbeat. Ethan dove aside, rolling behind a stack of crates as the beast slammed into metal, denting the wall. Ranger launched himself at its flank, teeth sinking into the sinewy flesh of its arm. The creature roared, swinging violently. The dog held firm until a backhand sent him flying across the room, his body hitting a support beam with a sickening thud. "Ranger!" Ethan shouted, firing a volley of rounds into the creature's torso. The bullets tore through gray skin, spilling a dark, oily substance that steamed on contact with air, but the beast didn't fall. It turned, roaring again, a sound that carried pain and fury and something heartbreakingly human. Leah screamed. The beast lunged toward her. Ethan sprinted, slamming into its shoulder first, driving his combat knife into the base of its neck. It shrieked, twisting violently, sending both man and monster crashing into the control console. Sparks burst around them. Ethan gritted his teeth, wrenching the blade free and jamming it again under its jaw. The creature's hand wrapped around his torso, squeezing hard enough to crack ribs. "Now, Emily!" he roared. Emily's trembling hands found the ignition switch. She twisted the starter once, twice, and on the third try, the snowcat engine roared to life, coughing out a cloud of black smoke. "It's running!" she shouted. Leah stumbled toward the controls, yanking open the hangar's heavy doors. The mechanism groaned, the massive gates shuddering open just enough to reveal the howling white storm outside. Ethan tore himself free, rolling toward Ranger, who was limping but alive, his left side matted with blood. The creature, wounded but still moving, smashed its claws against the floor, dragging itself toward them. Ethan fired one last time, 3 shots straight into its skull. The monster dropped, its head slamming against the steel floor with a dull finality. For a long second, no one moved. Then the emergency lights flickered red and an alarm blared. Leah's voice cracked through the noise. "You killed the power regulator. It's triggering the backup core. This whole place is about to blow." Ethan cursed under his breath. Figures. He grabbed Ranger by the harness, helping him to his feet. "Everyone on the snowcat, now!" They piled into the vehicle, Emily taking the passenger seat. Leah slumped in the back, clutching her side, her face pale but determined. Ethan slammed the accelerator, and the snowcat's treads churned through layers of snow and ice. The hangar behind them shuddered as explosions echoed through the compound. Through the rear window, a fireball rose into the night sky, sending shards of burning debris spiraling into the storm. For a brief moment, they thought they had escaped, until Ranger began to growl again. Ethan squinted into the rearview mirror. Through the swirling snow, a figure was following them. Human, not beast. It was Marcus Voss. His once pristine black tactical uniform was torn, one sleeve soaked with blood. His face, usually impassive, now burned with fury. The left side of his jaw was bruised and darkened, and his gray eyes glowed with a hatred that looked almost serene. He moved with the efficiency of a predator who had lost everything except purpose. Slung across his back was a compact thermal rifle, the kind designed to punch through armor. He fired. The first shot shattered the snowcat's side window, glass spraying across Emily's lap. Ethan swerved, cursing, "Hold on!" Another shot hit the rear treads, sparks flaring. Leah screamed, clutching the seat. "He'll hit the fuel tank!" Ethan spun the snowcat hard, using the terrain as cover. Ranger barked wildly, leaning against the door, his instincts screaming to attack. "Stay down," Ethan ordered. Marcus was gaining ground. Every movement was calm, measured, a man completely unafraid to die. Ethan could see his breath through the snow, a slow, even rhythm. "You think you're saving her?" Marcus shouted over the wind, his voice amplified by the storm. "She's the reason they built it. The DNA in that thing, it came from her." Emily froze. "What?" she whispered. Marcus kept walking, rifle raised. "Project Aurora. Her genome was the template. They spliced her. DNA to make Specimen 9. She's their key, and you're protecting her." The words hit harder than the bullets. Emily stared out at Marcus, horror dawning in her eyes. "He's lying," Leah hissed from the back, but even her voice lacked conviction. Ethan didn't speak. His mind raced, every reaction from Specimen 9, every glance at Emily, every flicker of recognition in the creature's gaze. It wasn't rage, it was something else. Marcus raised the rifle again, but this time, before he could fire, the ground beneath him cracked. A section of ice gave way, and the man vanished into a crevasse, his scream swallowed by the storm. Ethan didn't slow down. "We're not stopping," he muttered. The snowcat roared forward into the blizzard, its headlights carving tunnels of white through the night. Inside, silence settled like a second snowfall. Emily sat motionless, her eyes distant, haunted by the revelation. Leah tried to speak, but couldn't find the words. Ranger leaned against Ethan's leg, his breathing slow but steady. They drove for what felt like hours, until the faint outline of a communication tower appeared through the storm, bent, half buried, but standing. Ethan slowed the snowcat, staring at it with a flicker of hope. "If that thing still works," he said quietly, "we can call for extraction." Emily finally turned to him, voice barely a whisper. "And if it doesn't?" Ethan's gaze stayed fixed on the tower as lightning flashed across the sky. "Then we're on our own." Outside, beneath the layers of snow and shadow, something massive stirred, something that had survived both fire and ice. The storm had begun to die by the time they reached the old communication tower. Wind moaned through its bent steel frame like the voice of a ghost. Ethan Cole shut off the snowcat engine, the sound fading into a heavy silence. The landscape around them was nothing but white and gray, broken only by the jagged antenna rising from the ice like a grave marker. He stepped out first, rifle slung across his chest, breath forming pale clouds. His face was gaunt, streaked with grime and fatigue, yet there was still something steady in his eyes, the calm that only men who had made peace with death carried. Ranger, limping but alert, followed close, the snow crunching softly beneath his paws. The dog's fur was matted with dried blood, one ear torn, but his posture remained proud, a soldier's until the end. Dr. Emily Grant climbed down from the passenger seat, wrapping her parka tight around her. The exhaustion in her face couldn't hide the deeper conflict beneath. The revelation of her DNA's link to Specimen 9 haunted her more than the creature itself. Her copper hair was tangled and streaked with frost, her eyes hollow, yet burning with something fierce. Guilt, maybe, or resolve. Behind her, Dr. Leah Monroe limped heavily, still clutching the pack that contained what little remained of the Northbridge data. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in the cold light, but her will to survive shone through the pain. She was a survivor by intellect, not strength. Every step a battle she refused to lose. They trudged toward the base of the tower. The metal structure was half buried in snow, the access hatch rusted nearly shut. Ethan pried it open with his knife, and a gust of stale air hissed out. Inside, the narrow maintenance stair spiraled upward into darkness. "You two stay here," he ordered. "I'll check the power relay." Leah shook her head. "You'll need someone to reboot the system once the main line's stable. I can do it." Emily hesitated. "Then I'll go too." Ethan looked at her, then simply nodded. He knew by now that arguing with her was useless. They climbed into the tower, their flashlights slicing through the dark. The air smelled of rust and frozen oil. Wind whistled through the holes in the walls. Halfway up, Ethan paused. There was something etched into the metal beside the ladder, half covered in frost. A message scratched in with a knife. "They're listening." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. At the top, they found the control room, cramped, filled with ancient consoles coated in ice. A cracked window overlooked the endless expanse of snow and the smoldering ruins of the Northbridge facility far below. Leah wiped frost from one of the panels and began typing, her thin fingers moving with practiced precision. "System's ancient," she muttered. "Manual uplink only. If I can align the dish, I might reach an emergency satellite." Ethan adjusted the antenna lever while Emily searched for a power switch. After several tense seconds, a low hum filled the air, followed by a flicker of dim green light across the console. "You got it," Ethan said. Leah smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Signal's weak. I'll boost it with the backup cell." She pulled a small cylindrical device from her bag, a field-grade transmitter, sleek and modern. Ethan frowned. "That's Northbridge tech." Leah met his gaze evenly. "Stolen from them. It's the only thing that can get through the interference." She plugged it in. The signal meter rose, beeping steadily. Static filled the speakers. Then a faint voice crackled through. "This is U.S. Coast Guard Station Duluth. Identify your—" Leah's face lit with hope. "We've got them," she cried. Ethan leaned toward the mic. "This is Lieutenant Ethan Cole, Navy SEAL. 3 survivors requesting emergency extraction. Coordinates—" Before he could finish, the entire tower shuddered. Metal screamed. The lights flickered. Outside, the wind wasn't the only thing moving. Something massive was stirring beneath the snowdrifts near the base. Ranger barked furiously, hackles raised, eyes fixed on the window. Emily froze. It's not over. A deep rumble rolled across the ice. Then, like a breaching whale, the snow erupted. A monstrous figure burst through the white, taller and broader than Specimen 9. Its skin a darker shade of gray, almost black. Its eyes burned crimson in the storm. Leah stumbled backward, whispering, "My God, Phase 10." Ethan raised his rifle, though he knew bullets would do little. "Get that message out," he barked. The creature slammed against the tower's lower supports, shaking the structure violently. Metal beams groaned. The console sparked. Leah screamed as sparks danced across her hands, but she didn't stop typing. "Almost there." The mic flared to life again. "Repeat, this is—" And then the sound cut off as the tower lurched sideways. Ethan grabbed Emily, pulling her toward the emergency ladder. "Move!" Ranger followed, snarling as debris crashed around them. Leah tried to rise but slipped, blood smearing the floor. "Go!" she shouted. "It's transmitting! Just go!" Emily hesitated, eyes wide with horror. "Leah! Now!" Leah screamed. The tower tilted again, and the entire upper deck collapsed. Ethan and Emily tumbled down the ladder, metal slicing past them. The creature's roar drowned out everything. They hit the snow hard. Ethan rolled, shielding Emily with his body. Above them, the tower snapped in half, crashing onto the ice with a deafening roar. A shock wave of snow exploded outward. Ranger barked wildly, darting to Ethan's side, nudging his arm. Ethan coughed, his face pale. His leg was bent wrong, pain shooting through every nerve. Emily tried to pull him up, sobbing, "No, no, no." Through the haze, he saw the monster's silhouette still moving toward them. But before it reached the wreck, a streak of light cut across the sky, a helicopter flare. The rescue team had seen the signal. The creature froze, its head lifting toward the light, confusion or fear flickering across its alien features. Then the ice beneath it cracked with a thunderous sound, and both beast and tower sank into the frozen abyss. Ethan exhaled, a long, ragged breath. The blizzard had quieted. The sky above glowed faintly pink with the first sign of dawn. Ranger pressed close, whining softly. Emily held Ethan's hand, tears freezing on her cheeks. He managed a faint smile. "Told you we'd make it," he whispered. Minutes later, the thumping of rotor blades filled the air. A Coast Guard helicopter hovered above, lowering a rescue basket. Emily and Ranger went first. When they pulled Ethan up, he looked down at the sinking ice where the tower once stood. For a moment, he thought he saw movement far below, something glowing faintly red before it vanished into darkness. Hours later, as they flew over the frozen lake, Emily leaned her head against the window. "Do you think it's over?" she asked quietly. Ethan looked at her, then out toward the endless white. "With people like Northbridge," he said softly, "it's never over. But as long as someone's willing to stand up, maybe that's enough." Ranger rested his head on Ethan's knee, closing his eyes at last. Far below, under the shifting ice, a single red light blinked once, then twice, before going still. Sometimes miracles don't come with thunder or blinding light. They come quietly, in the courage to keep moving when the road ends, in the faith to reach out when the world feels cold, and in the grace to protect what's still good when everything else has fallen apart. Ethan's story reminds us that even in the harshest winter, God's hand can guide us toward dawn. In our own lives, we may face storms that feel endless, loss, fear, or the silence of unanswered prayers. But just as Ethan found light through loyalty, sacrifice, and hope, we too can find our way if we keep faith alive in our hearts. Miracles aren't always loud. Sometimes they arrive in the form of a helping hand, a loyal friend, or the courage to forgive. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need a reminder that God still works through the quiet miracles of everyday people. Leave a comment below to tell us what part of the story spoke to you most, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of hope, faith, and redemption. May God bless you and your loved ones, and may He keep your heart steady even through the storm.